Hi there. Thank you ever so much for being here. We are about to host a workshop where we are talking about data driven empathy. The reason why this is important is we have seen a client very recently who has been able to unlock an additional 20% in user growth using these steps and this methodology, which we are about to talk about. So it's not going to take very long. Sit back. Please look at our other workshops as well that we have available if you want that extra value afterwards. And we'll see you soon. Alrighty, let's get into it. So, as I mentioned, we're talking about how our client achieved 20% growth while utilizing data driven insights and applying empathy. And the empathetic part of this is where you're going to unlock a lot of great insights and value, not just from the data that you have currently or the data that you're going to transform your business into gathering, but how you then bring that value back to your customers. Everything you do should be customer centric. And this is really one of those top methodologies that puts that kind of on the map, so to speak, for your business. So, data driven empathy, what is it first and foremostly? We are talking about the combination of information and emotion that connects you with your customers. And just to dive into that a little bit more, what we're really specifically looking at here, information is the quantitative element of your data strategy, utilizing product analytics tools, which we touch on shortly, and being able to measure behavioral analytics from your SaaS product. We're matching that information with the emotion that your customers hold before, during, and after interacting with your product. And there are various sources and ways to get that information, which we will talk about in just a moment. But we're really looking at combining those two worlds together. What we're doing here really is looking at a bit more of a zoomed in view as to how products and marketing work together to initiate and actually kind of develop additional growth levers to work together in order to actually kind of form an alliance to push those things and to actually kind of have a positive ROI as a result. Okay. So if you're currently sitting here, if you're in marketing, if you're in product, if you're any kind of visionary within the SaaS ecosystem, and you're sitting there going, I don't think that our product and marketing teams work close enough together. This is going to be one of those ways in which brings them together. This methodology is definitely going to support that, and is definitely something that is 100% necessary in all SaaS businesses. So when we look at the kind of data strategy and being able to apply that human emotion towards it, we look at this in three layers. First layer is you've got your functional insights. These are going to be things that are your basic kind of standard events that you're going to track within your strategy. If you have an app, it's going to be things like app install and app open. It's going to be certain things like your product interactions, and you may have e-com or retail people viewing products as a result of that. If you're a gaming company, you may have people completing certain chapters, for example, right? So you've got your functional insights. Your behavioral data is then going to apply another layer to that quantitative part of your strategy. How are people doing, completing certain things? When are they doing it? What are they doing to get there? What are their linear journeys, their flows, their funnels? How are they also, you're also applying an element here of where these users are coming from. Are they coming from social media, from a newsletter or email campaign? Are they coming direct to you from Google? What's drawing them into your product? What are they therefore then completing within your ecosystem before they then leave? Are they actually then likely to come back? Big question. The third and final layer here is the human emotional and the intelligence that comes with that. And that's your qualitative information. There are two ways in which you can actually think about the qualitative and the human emotion intelligence line. Is that one is through surveying and interviewing, actually getting face-to-face or direct communication with your users, your customers, to gain an element of kind of feedback, criticism from them. The second way is to put yourself in their shoes. Try and understand what they want to accomplish, why they're coming to your product, and what the emotions are that they're feeling when they come to your product. And I think to get to that point even faster, instead of having these I think statements, to get to the I know statements, you need to be there needs to be some element of interacting with your customers or your target audience. We call it out in the wild. So if you're currently sat behind your desk and you don't know what the emotions are of your users or your target audience before they come to your product, really seriously consider standing up and getting out into the wild and getting in front of your target audience, because that is going to be your richest layer of information that you can kind of deliver and execute across your organization. Now, our client, what was happening? So our client, just for a bit of background information, they're based in the UK, but they've got global reach. They're in the entertainment space and they have both a web product and an app product, but the web product is the most prominent source of information and source of interaction that users have with this particular business. The challenges they were facing: stagnant growth. They were finding that they were getting new users in, but some parts of their product had a bit of a leaky bucket syndrome. Users were falling out a little bit too much in relation to the number of users coming in. Therefore, their growth was fairly stagnant. It was fairly plateaued. There wasn't really that kind of steady increase over time that you would like to see, regardless of leaky buckets. That's one thing, but that growth just wasn't kind of on an upward trajectory. They had that increase in customer churn, as I just mentioned, and that leaky bucket was getting bigger. Those holes seemingly were popping up all across the product, which were very difficult to keep up with and to plug at times where there was high priority. So resources were relatively thin on the ground as well, which is never fantastic. As a result of all of that, they were struggling with their acquisition campaigns, algorithms changing, certain behaviors changing as well. Again, this human emotion layer becomes really important, and that intelligence that you get from it in all of these areas, not just in your product, but outside of your product with marketing as well. How do you adapt and change to your target audience? And how do you then acquire those users? Because your market share may be, let's say, 1 million people, but that 1 million people should be split into cohorts of what they're thinking, how they're thinking, what their challenges are at all times. And you may go for the first 10%, which may be your quick wins, and you get 100,000 people in really quickly, or over a 10-year period, for example. It could be that long. But how do you then address the remaining 90% in their individual segments? So you need to always be adapting to those points, and your data strategy is going to be huge for that. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit now about the steps that we took to support before we get to the results. Okay, so step one, you need to learn what your customers like, what they struggle with, and what's important to them via product interactions. I've spoken to this a little bit already, but your main priorities here, and look, this is a super easy step. Should be already doing this, but this is really looking at how do you collect data, and collecting from multiple sources. You should always be collecting your data from multiple sources, and that can be your website, it could be a server side interactions. You might be looking at an A/B testing tool, which you're grabbing data in from. Your app, if you have one, is also going to be another source of information. There's going to be so much information out there that you can collect. Make sure that you are bringing that in. Social media attribution, and other elements like that. So you want to make sure that you've got a super accurate and super confident data strategy that is collecting all of the relevant touch points for your business. After that, once you've got that information, you then need to analyze it. Analyze where people are coming from. What features and functions are they interacting with? That then helps you understand what they like and what they dislike. Learn from their product interactions as to how they interact with your onboarding, how they actually get activated into your product. If people aren't activating themselves based on the KPIs that you've set, you can clearly define an emotion attached with that. People aren't activating. There is a pain point. It is your job to then find what that pain point is and how users are coming across it so that you can deploy fixes or optimizations. That can come in the form of function/feature overhauls, but it can come in very small MVP or false door tests to basically validate or invalidate the hypotheses that you set. So it's a really super simple step in the grand scheme of things, but there's a lot that make up this step. To build on this, you do need to take into account some major considerations. If you're web predominantly, you need to look at consent management. And the reason why I mention that is because you need to be sure that you are looking at a decent sample size of your data. If only 20% of your users are opting into cookies, therefore you are only seeing 20% of all data that you have available to you because of the user's privacy preferences. You need to take that into consideration and model what that means, not just for what you're seeing now, but what you might see later after experimentation. You need to understand your traffic. Where are your users coming from? Are they coming from places like social media and they being attributed to that? Are they being pulled into your environment, or are you opting for a more of a push strategy? Are you using partners and other organizations to help get you your traffic? You need to really consider who those users are, what they're coming in to accomplish, and what their expectations are. And thirdly, I mentioned this already, the experimentations that you might be running. Make sure that you're not running a whole heap of experimentations at the same time in the same domain. So we call like domains like in the same area. So onboarding is a domain, activation is a domain, retention and churn are sort of under the same domain umbrella, but could be treated very differently. Consider what experiments that you're running throughout all of this to make sure that you are not skewing your data and therefore appending wrongful emotions at the right times. Okay, so for step 2, you're going to develop a deep understanding of your customers as real people with their own needs. What I mentioned earlier, get out into the wild, really step into the shoes of your user. But the way that you're going to do this is what your organization should already have is a set of user personas. And this is going to define the particular characteristics of your target audience so that you know how to speak with them and what their expectations are around your product. So you should already have these personas built, right? You're going to understand these different traits, and you may have 5, you may have more. What you're going to do is you're going to learn how you map those traits to particular data signals within your strategy. So how are people behaving in your product, which means that you can say, right, that's Jessica or that's Sarah that is in my product. It's not always going to be, I say, 100% accurate. It's not always going to be incredibly easy to do that. But the more you can learn, not just about, okay, we need to talk to these people at the top of the funnel and then just assume that they are the right people that are falling into your product. You need to have some kind of awareness and understanding that they are the people that are falling into your product. Because only in that state can you truly understand things like, are we actually delivering the experience that we set out to for this particular person? Are we communicating with that person in the right way, which we can then see and correlate to what the people are that are falling into the funnel? If no, you can then make really well-informed adjustments. If yes, you know how you can scale with certain personas, so it hits both product and marketing really well. And again, like you're going to map out these traits to particular signals, and within particular products, you can set different cohorts and custom events based on what that information means to your company. So the required tools here, I mentioned about product analytics. The way that I would personally do this and the way that my company would personally look at recommending tools, you're looking at tools like Amplitude or Mixpanel. These are going to be far superior product analytics and data tools in comparison to like your GA4s. And even if you started looking at that information falling into Looker Studio, for example, the benefit of still running these tools like Amplitude and Mixpanel is you can set them up in super easy ways and simple ways to set these tools up almost on your own if you cannot fully rely on dev work. Both of these tools, to my knowledge, I know Mixpanel definitely does, integrates with a tool like Google Tag Manager for websites, where you can mark up all of the events and information that you need and pass it on to Mixpanel. There will be some dev requirements that are necessary in there, but at least you can get started pretty quickly to start gathering that information. For apps, it's a little bit more complicated. You will need dev intervention with that, but it all starts with the planning and implementation to ensure that you have a super accurate data strategy and the implementation of it, but also to make sure that you yourself and people across your organization are confident with the data that is being viewed and analyzed. Okay, so for step 3, you're going to gather qualitative information and the emotions of your users that you can link to particular actions and the associated feelings. So, what you're really looking at understanding here are the particular challenges that your customers are facing before they enter your product. And that could be for the first time, but it also could be at multiple times throughout their journey. And you're going to understand what emotions come with those challenges. So, realistically, what you're looking to attract here is if people are frustrated with an experience out in the real world or with a different product, how do you take away that frustration? If someone's curious about what's going on, how do you bring them the right education and information about what it is? Match their emotions, the typical and more common emotions that they're going to feel when they enter your product, with the things that are going to help them activate within your actual product in your SaaS company. So again, getting out into the world and understanding in particular situations, what do you feel when dot dot dot? How do you feel if dot dot dot? Get those emotions and use them to your advantage, not in a manipulative way, but use them to your advantage to improve the user experience within your product. And this can have a tenfold impact on how your product grows and how people activate and therefore actually retain in your product. We've got to remember in this situation that people buy from people. People don't buy from faceless brands, and if they do, it's typically maybe because they've got a really big challenge and they don't care about the human kind of touch or the emotional side of it. But if you can let people know that you are listening to them, you actually got what they need, that will actually speak volumes when it comes to your retention modeling, your churn. Sorry, and your retention and your churn strategies that you might have within your business. The leaky bucket becomes far less leaky, less holes in it, and you'll gain a much more like loyal fan base. Right. Third and final step. As a visionary in your SaaS organization, you need to make sure that you have the correct statements to proceed in achieving the same outcome here with this methodology. What I see a lot in every day is I hear it mostly obviously as I saying I think, the I think statements. I think statements hold no confidence in how they sound. I think users want this. I think users do that. There needs to be a belief system around your data strategy, not just for your own internal purposes of yourself, if you're in product, if you're in marketing, but within the organization. If you carry on saying I think statements to anyone in the organization, if you carry on saying that, it doesn't build on confidence. Then it becomes a we're not sure about this data. It doesn't feel like we have certainty with what users are doing or what we need them to do or how they're actually accomplishing that. So what you really need to start doing is talking about your data strategy and the outcomes in I know. This comes from implementation, making sure you have accurate information, making sure you're building that confidence. But you need to start saying people, I know this about our users and I know it with a very high degree of confidence. So stop saying I think, start saying I know. And if you can't say I know because you don't have the confidence to say I know, you really need to look back through your data strategy and figure out where you build on that confidence, where you build on that accuracy in order to transform the I think statement into I know. Now, for this particular methodology, there are titans that are already doing this kind of strategy. To be specific, Netflix and Amazon. They use very clever data triggers and signals based on personas, based on our interactions, to determine if we are getting what we want and what we need. Netflix is constantly changing the face of the TV show and film tiles. They're constantly moving around their carousels. If it's comedy, if it's action, they are trying to pander to what we feel and how we want to do things. Now, the more in depth you get with this particular methodology, especially if you think about Netflix and Amazon to a particular extent as well, they are in a position where they can tell when we're feeling sad, when we're feeling happy, when we need to be uplifted, when we're feeling a bit sassy, based on the things that we view, watch, and buy. They can already determine that because they are applying this methodology day in, day out, by the minute, by the hour, to understand who their users are, what they want, and how they can best serve them moving forwards. Now, just like your users, for your organization, for us as consumers of Netflix and Amazon. We drive the narrative for them. They allow their users to drive that narrative with viewing multiple things related to the challenges and pains that we feel, to interact. Basically, our interactions are analyzed and measured. To help them solve our challenges. That's what their product analytics is there to do. It's what your product analytics is there to do, or should be there to do. And then they want to understand what our commitments are, and to make sure that what we found is what we need or we want for future commitment as well. So it plays a big part in being able to drive usage and engagement. Now, the outcome really is to generate that empathy for your customers to create truly amazing experiences. When we match facts with accurate data analytics, you are able to build a business, a SaaS business, that is truly the best experience, or does become the best experience for your users that is out there. And when you start combining these two things with a super high degree of confidence, matching persona traits with data signals, you are able to deliver on something that no one in your vertical or in your industry will be able to do. You'll be a cut above the rest. Trust me. So if we look at this in relation to our client results and impact, we've already mentioned they saw a 20% increase in growth. That was directly related to revenue. Churning users felt that they were being listened to and their needs were being met. New users were entering the growth loop, and they found that the information they were resonating with it a lot more. The actions were a lot more in line with what they expected and what they wanted to accomplish, and therefore they felt listened to, and therefore they stuck around for much longer. Hence the improved retention. We found that continuously getting value from the product in this way increased engagement and LTV. The increased data accuracy took our client from saying, I think users want this, I think users are doing this, into I know statements. So having it is one thing, but the utilization of that information is what's going to help support yourself in your organization achieve the KPIs and the objectives that have been set out either for you or what you set out for you and your team. And that's it. You can very simply achieve growth by tapping into your customer emotions using this methodology that you just looked at in this workshop. And so I think if you found this useful, what would be really helpful is to hear from you. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to have a look at our other workshops that we have available. We have blog posts as well. Please feel free to dive around. The information that we have is for you to consume. We're not asking for any emails or gatekeeping anything here. So thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.